Hello and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. I'm Dan Hall, one of your hosts, and with me is Dave Jinks, our co-host. And Dave, I've always been interested in weird places, and maybe that's why I live in Washington. I don't know if there's a connection there, but I heard somebody on a program, a virtual program that was sponsored by MUFON, which is the Seattle UFO Network, and her name was Katie Griboski. And when I listened to her story, I went, "Whoa, we should try to get her on our program," because she, growing up, lived in a very weird place. So if you're interested in weird places, we've got Katie to share her story of growing up in a very weird place. Should we bring Katie on?
Cool, yes, and I want to just be sure, Katie, how do you pronounce your last name? I think Dan got it right on, but let's confirm.
He did. It's Griboski.
Griboski. Okay, good enough. Let's go.
Now, why Dave asked that question is we've done another show with Bill Grabowski, and so I keep wanting to pronounce it that way. So we'll
now with the W. A lot of people do.
Okay, so Katie,
Katie's good.
Okay, good. You have some connection with MUFON, correct?
I do. I joined MUFON back in 2012 because, I had a lot of questions about what happened to me as a young girl. I had both UFO experiences. Actually, it started even earlier when I was young, and I was born in Illinois. And my grandfather, who was in the Navy, had a oblong-shaped craft sighting investigated by J. Allen Hynek in the early '60s. So, I kind of grew up hearing about UFOs, and we had encounters in Illinois. And so I've always been interested about, the phenomenon both there and at the High Strangeness Ranch later in the '70s. So I joined MUFON in 2012, came in right as a field investigator just to kind of do my own research and investigate other people and trying to connect dots and commonalities. And now I'm the Colorado State Director there, as well as Big MUFON's administrator for what they call the Mars program, which is basically we had a team of people, and I administered all the redaction of old paper reports from 1969 clear till when they digitized them all. So that was a 3.5-year long project. And the ultimate goal really is to get all these reports out to researchers so they can actually have eyes on these and have them digitized and all that. So, and now that project's moving into Project Aquarius, which will be worldwide. So it's pretty exciting to be a part of that.
I have been a member of MUFON in the past, and I think Dave has too. And maybe one of the things I know about being a state director is kind of a double-edged sword. You can get a lot of cool things done, but it's also like a lightning rod for, if something goes wrong, you're the person that gets blamed for it or something. Has that been your experience to some degree?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. Colorado's been a pretty strong chapter. We have a board of directors, and we're more like a family. So, I'm one of those no drama mama kind of people. I don't play into any of that drama. Never have, never will. So I just put my head down, and we all just do our best to investigate reports and get information out to the public. And we bring in great guest speakers. We actually have Yvonne Smith flying in this coming Saturday. I'll actually be in the Ozarks, but my assistant state director and others are running it. I keep missing Yvonne. I haven't met her in person yet, but no, it's a good group. And I know there's been a lot of controversy in MUFON, and people have had, some issues with MUFON. And honestly, I looked into those and I've made my own decision. I've always been treated very well. And most of the people that I've met are in there just investigating and doing a great job of it. And so I haven't had any of those issues. And there's been kind of a changing of the guards recently, and things are changing. And I think we're improving. And to me, the most exciting thing happening within MUFON, and part of the reason I like doing our MUFON What's Up show on KGRA too, is we're bridging that paranormal gap and the UFO gap and that consciousness gap. Because I think MUFON had that stereotype of being nuts and bolts, and we are scientific, and science is so important. Science and data and research is so important. And I do a lot of that. But also to be open to the experiencers. We have the ERT team that looks into contacts and all that. And that's important too. And kind of bringing in that consciousness piece and the paranormal piece. And to me, that's what I'm in there fighting to do, and bringing that change to MUFON. I think it's a change that's been needed for a while.
Yeah, we did a show with Gwen Farrell, and we got in that discussion is where are the boundaries? Where does the UFO stuff stop and the paranormal stuff begin? And maybe there aren't any boundaries, or those are artificial boundaries, kind of thing. So, well, let's talk about your
Yeah, I agree.
young experiences as a youth. Talk about some of the first UFO experiences you had, and then let's talk about, and I think the place you grew up in, Colorado, if I'm remembering correctly, is Kiowa. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Kiowa, Colorado. Yeah, it's in Elbert County. In UFO folklore, it was actually known as Clearview. And what's interesting about all this, when I joined way back, so I have a sister who's older than I, and my mom. Now, we did not live on this ranch property full time. My mom was dating a gentleman that lived there, along with his ex-wife that had a new love interest, and their 3 boys. The 2 younger boys lived with us during the week. The oldest boy lived on the ranch property out there. Kiowa is a really small town. It still is to this day. So the 2 younger boys lived with us to go to a big school district, the Cherry Creek School District out here. And so we would drive the boys back and forth. And every time we were out on that property, things would happen. Really high strangeness, unusual things. It was eerie. It was terrifying. And all this time, all these years, I thought it was isolated to just the ranch property. And I never knew anybody knew anything about it, because we were threatened and we were warned never to talk about it. So it wasn't until 2013 that I came across this book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher. Both, PhD. And in that book is a chapter called Other Hotspots. And I start reading about this Rocky Mountain Ranch in Colorado. And I knew the weird dichotomy of the family. They use pseudonyms for the names and the location, because this location was always hidden. Nobody ever knew the true location of the ranch. And I was like, holy cow, this has to be it. And in that book, they mentioned Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, was one of the researchers out there. So I quickly got his contact information, wrote to him. He verified, yes, this is the ranch in Kiowa, Colorado. And it's been almost now, 9 years of heavy research on this. And what I've come to learn is it wasn't just isolated to the ranch. It affected the whole county, even in Elizabeth, Rama, other states. I mean, Linda Moulton Howe was out there. She was an investigator reporter at the time, and she was out, investigating these dozens and dozens and dozens of cattle mutilations. And not only cattle, but there were, horse and goat and even dog were mutilated. People had loaded shotguns by their door. There was $10,000. So back in the late 70s, $10,000 is a lot of money to, look for the perpetrators of these mutilations. There were unmarked helicopters, orange orbs flying off properties. There was military presence out there, and we can get into all this later in more detail. But so many high strangeness things. And to find out that this wasn't some big secret that I thought it was all these years, it's just been like, holy cow, I can't even believe this. So yeah, the sheriffs and George Yarnell, and I've flown out to Florida and interviewed Bill Waugh's wife. He's passed away, and hearing the sheriff's story. And he was actually in Linda Moulton Howe's movie, A Strange Harvest, talking about the mutilations, but there was much more to it than that. There was a lot of paranormal things happening and just so much. So it really just mirrors all the activity at the Skinwalker Ranch. And there's other locations as well.
So what are some of your first memories of that high strangeness?
Yeah, well, one of the first memories was, it was like the spring day, and in Colorado we get this wet, heavy snow, but it was sunny out. It's typical Colorado spring weather. And my sister and I were out in front of the ranch house, just flipping the frisbee back and forth. And we happened to look down, and there was a large dry dirt circle where nothing grew. It was dry dirt, but on the outside was with this wet, heavy snow. And we're like, well, this is weird. And of course, my investigator science mind in later years is like, well, maybe there was a missile silo or something there that's causing things not to be there. That wasn't the case. There was never a missile silo there, or any silo for that matter. And what was really cool about this, when John Schuessler, for those of you who don't know who John Schuessler was, he's one of the founding fathers of MUFON. And when he heard of my connection to the ranch property, he's like, here, Katie, here's the briefing document. And that had so many confirmations to me of memories that I had, because you have to remember, during that time, I'm 9 to 12 years old. I'm a pretty young little girl. And so I had vague memories. You know, my sister has memories. She's 6 years older, so she had more concrete memories. And that circle was actually in there. There were actually 2 reported, and the investigators measured it. They were 35 feet in diameter. And in that report, it mentions the snow on the outside, and it mentions drops of blood in the snow in that report. I was like, holy cow, that's one memory I have. Yeah. So the most terrifying night out there, actually, one of the first accounts when the family bought the property, and the property had sat empty for like 10 to 12 years. It was abandoned really fast. Nobody lived on this property. And there were like town rumors about it, okay, of weird lights flying off and on the property and all this stuff. So when they moved in, I mean, there was a pickup truck there that was abandoned that had the keys in the ignition. Like, people left there really fast. One of the first things the family reported were these strange bangs and noise under the ground that almost sounded like wind turbines or something, but there was nothing under there. Humming noises. Sometimes the hum would get so loud people couldn't hear themselves speak over it. Weird things like that. And one of the nights, it was the boys' mother's birthday, and the adults were playing board games in the front room, and the 3 boys and my sister and I were all hanging out in the boys' room. It was really late at night, like late at night. And all of a sudden that humming noise started up, and everybody's like, oh, because when that humming would start up, everybody's on edge. Then the power in the house goes out. Okay. At that moment, the brightest light I've ever seen in my life, bright white light, comes in the boys' window. And we're all freaking out. But the scariest thing was, you got to remember, there's no power in the house, but it sounded like out of every orifice of that house, there was this disembodied electrical sounding voice. And it was warning. It says, your friend, we have allowed you to remain. Your friends will be warned not to mention us, you know, da, 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 da. And that was terrifying. And so my mom, my sister, and I get in the car and we drive home. We lived about an hour from the ranch property, from Kiowa to Englewood. I get home that evening, I get inside the front door, I'm down on the ground, and I'm like kind of paralyzed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't form words. My mom, my sister are like, what did you eat? What did you eat? And I'm trying to say peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And that lasted maybe 5 minutes or something. And I went upstairs into my bedroom and had my first full-blown really bad migraine headache. And I suffered those migraines like weekly for years, until I finally went through biofeedback training for it. And I never really connected it to the activity on the ranch until all those years later, like, well, maybe something like, I don't know. But that was a really scary night because of that disembodied electrical voice. That was really scary. I never saw any ET entities out there, but there were reports of 2 different types of ETs being out there, and we can get into that. There was reports of Sasquatch beings out there, which I come to find out later through my research that when I went to Dr. Leo Sprinkle, so anybody's interested in this topic, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, for 40 years, he was ahead of his time. He was a pioneer. We actually just lost him November 14th of 2020. He passed away. But he worked with abductees and contactees, and he was a hypnotherapist, and he was a psychologist out of Laramie, Wyoming. And he has all his years of work, his body of work, and in archives at the Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming. And he had the original research documents, and they're there on the ranch property. So I went there and, of course, looked at all those. And in those files, they had 2 drawings. They had drawings of one of the ETs spotted out there that was sketched back at the day. And they had a drawing of one of the Bigfoot Sasquatch creatures out there that was seen. And what's interesting about that, I present those in my presentations when I speak, and I get an email from Bob Robert Solis, and there's a book called Stalking the Prairie, and it's a book about these high strangeness events in Montana in the late 70s in Maelstrom Air Force Base, and military men that were taking lie detector tests because they were encountering UFOs, high strangeness things, as well as these Sasquatch beings. And there was a sketch of one. You take the sketch from Elbert County and the sketch from, Montana, and they're almost identical. They look quite different than your typical Bigfoot creature, so that was really interesting to have that connection. And that same thing happened about the ET sketch. When I first saw the sketch of the ET that was done on the ranch property in Colorado, I had never seen anything like it before. And not in movies, not on TV, not in books, nowhere. So I put it in like a drawer because I wanted to see if I could find anything like it. It was interesting looking. It had these tubes that came out from the side of its head. It had almost like a box torso, these really long, skinny arms, not the huge almond eyes like you typically see on an alien. They were bigger than our eyes, but not as big. Heavy brow, wrinkles around the mouth, wrinkles on the forehead. Very unusual looking. And a couple of years later, I was with MUFON. I wasn't the state director at the time. I was actually the guest speaker coordinator. So I had arranged a guest speaker to come in, and I invited this gentleman. His name was Sean Bartok, and he had written a book called Flashbacks about a property that he had. And he changed the location in the book as well in Castle Rock, Colorado, which is still fairly close to Kiowa. But come to find out that his property was literally 14 miles away from the ranch property in Kiowa. And I'm sitting in the third row watching Sean's presentation, and up pops this drawing of the beings he saw. The tubes, the same eyes, the same wrinkles, the same, you overlay them one on top of the other. And to me, it is the most compelling thing I've ever seen in my life, because we didn't know each other. We had not seen, I was just like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And he had a lot of similar, he had the circles on the grounds, the orange orbs, the humming noises, the cattle mutilations, and so on. So it's just like, what is going on, And I have theories as to what was going on.
Well,
Dave, jump in here. I know this is, I don't want to.
there's so much stuff.
I know.
Weird. I got
That's true.
I started growing
You got lines on you. There you go.
stripes on my face like war paint or something. I'm like, am I morphing along with the story that Katie's telling? Everything's getting weird everywhere. But no, I want to hear, my next question would be why this area? What is happening in this area of this corner of the world? And Katie, led us right to it. She's going to tell us what she thinks is going on. Excuse me. And I would love to hear how you meld Bigfoot plus UFO plus mutilations all together in one thing, or somehow you connect them. But that's the only question I have, is how do you fit this stuff together?
Well, the question for me always has been, because even looking back in the reports, there was a question of, there was a military presence out there. And so there's the Colorado Springs has many military bases. We have NORAD, we have the Air Force Academy, we have Camp Carson. And in the late 70s, that property in Kiowa, the Air Force Academy property went further than it does today. So we know for certain we have photographs of these mysterious black helicopters. And what's interesting about the helicopters is I have newspaper reports that they were chasing and menacing people, like kids, even like chasing them in fields and all these crazy things. There's a really good book that it's actually a 45-page pamphlet kind of book, but it was a research done. It was called The Choppers and the Choppers. And I actually found a copy of it in Sweden. Klaus Svan has this great archives in Sweden, and he found a copy of it. It's really interesting because this was a phenomenon that was going on in several locations. Colorado had the most choppers spotted, whatever these mysterious choppers were. But these mutilations and these mysterious choppers were seen in Montana, in Wyoming, in Colorado, in Texas, in Utah, in Kansas, in Nebraska, like the whole center of our country, right? So I'm thinking, what about this is military? What about this is maybe secret Black access projects going on? Were they out there? I know that in Elbert County, we had the Titan missile silos out there at the time. So, for those of you who follow and research UFOs, military bases and nuclear weapons and UFOs kind of go hand in hand sometimes. So I don't know if meaning military, were out there mutilating some cattle to test soil, ground, water, who knows? But some of the interviews that I've done with some of these ranchers that had these mutilations done, I think it's so important to go back as a researcher, even all these years later, because none of it's solved, and revisit and re-interview these people. Because there was, even in Project Blue Book, they were looking at nuts and bolts craft. They weren't looking at paranormal activity. They weren't asking all these other questions. Did you see orbs? Did you have unusual things happening? Did you hear humming sounds? They weren't asking some of those paranormal questions. And so I had interviewed this one woman and her family. If you go to the museum in Elbert County, her family like really pioneered this location in Kiowa. So they were ranchers out there for decades and decades and decades. And right out of high school, her first name is Sheila. I'll just give her first name. They bought some property in Rama, Colorado, which is right on the border of Elbert County. And so this is, right there, 1978, high mutilation time. Sheriffs are out there in airplanes. I mean, everybody's on high alert. And they had a property miles and miles off the main county roads. So they're out there, she said, in the middle of nowhere. Her husband was on horseback checking the cows for calves, and he came across a dead calf, and the calf had 4 cuts in a perfect square with the top of the fur removed, but the skin was still on it, she said, and the calf was dead. So he gets on his horse, rides back to the ranch house and gets Sheila. They come back in the pickup truck, which she said took maybe 20 to 25 minutes. By the time they got back, that calf had been completely mutilated, cauterized, organs removed, blood drained. There was only the horse marks. There was no sounds of helicopters. There was no footprints. There was no blood dripped everywhere. And what's really cool is she found the original photographs from that. And she had photographs of what one of the calves looked like when a coyote jumps on the back. They will rip at those calves alive. They will just eat it alive. So for her to have that photographic evidence of that calf mutilation, and she said it scared the bejesus out of them because they felt like they were being watched. They said it felt eerie. And when, that feeling of being watched is something I had all the time as a young girl. And that's another connection that I had just made recently, because as a young girl, I had a lot of paranormal things. I would see shadow figures in my room all the time. I never slept alone. I always slept with my big sister, had the bed against the wall. I had to make sure the closet door was shut. Blue orbs. I had encounters with these blue orbs. And I never connected all this with the ranch and all that, but that Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book came out, and they're talking about people that visit Skinwalker Ranch and other high strangeness location have things like attached to them and go with them, the shadow figures and the orbs and things like that. So I think that is a part of it as well. And I have no idea what that is. And here's the funny thing about that, because my question was always, how much of this activity was military, Black access projects, how much of it was UFOs and unacknowledged, paranormal activity? And right now, I kind of sit at like maybe 50-50, like 50% military, 50% unknown. I think the military was out there trying to figure out some of the high strangeness things. One of the really cool things in that report that John Schuessler gave me was an incident about 2 A7D interceptor that actually in the report, it says we're in pursuit of a UFO. Okay. And they crashed. Both pilots ejected. Okay. And then they lost the aircraft. And I'm like, okay, well, if that happened, there would be reports. Sure enough, I found newspaper articles, and then actually Richard Doty of all people, Richard Doty, I talked to him at a conference and he goes, if you want that report, you need to send a FOIA request to Kirkland Air Force's base mishaps office. So I did that. And what was interesting about that, when I put in the request for the FOIA on that crash, I get a phone call from the head FOIA guy for all of the Air Force. We talked on the phone for an hour, and he told me, if you want anything from FOIA about Kiowa, you need to call me personally. And I didn't say I was looking at UFO data or mutilations or anything, but obviously if he looks up my name, they know what I'm looking at, right? So I'm sure they know. But I get a big report back from this incident. And what's fascinating to me is highly suspicious. There's a lot of information in it, but there's also a lot of redaction in it. And one of the interesting things to me is, first of all, it was at night. Both of the A-70s, they left Buckley Air Force Base and went towards Elizabeth at night. And in the report, it claims, and I've talked to people in the Air Force about this, that it was an instructor and a student, and that they had 255 rounds of live ammunition on board flying over residential areas at night with a student. People I've talked to said that doesn't sound correct. And the other interesting thing is they list the cause of the crash. And on one of the causes in parentheses, it says that the instructor misidentified another craft, but it doesn't identify what the craft was. It doesn't say it was a Cessna. It doesn't say if it was this, that, or the other thing. And then right under there, it says, then the student turned off his beaker when he should have turned off. And that's when the other pilot hit the tail and they both spun and they both ejected and both survived. So it's a highly suspicious report. There's just things that don't add up with it. So I'm thinking, yeah, they were probably in pursuit of UFOs. And another pilot that I talked to at the time was George Yarnell. He was the sheriff of Elbert County, and he actually has a report of chasing this orange orb craft. Him and Bill Wall, they were up in planes all the time trying to find these perpetrators of these mutilations. At the time, they thought they were like cults, satanic cults or whatever. And they saw an unidentified flying object also over Elbert County. So, I mean, something was going on. I don't know why in that small window it was so intense. Mutilations are still happening, strange things are still happening, but not to the degree it was back then. So something I have looked at, because we have Marley Woods in Missouri. We have the Skinwalker Ranch. We have the Blind Frog Ranch. And in the Mars program, I found another high strangeness place. It was called the UFO Creature Case, and it was in Ohiopyle, Pennsylvania. Okay, same kind of activity, Sasquatch, burns on the ground, paranormal, UFOs, all this stuff. And so what I did is I went to the magnetic anomalies map of the United States, and I was just looking at all these high strangeness locations, and every single one peaks the chart for being highly magnetic. It's that really, really light shade of pink on the map. So they're super highly magnetized areas. And most of them too are pretty close to Air Force bases and that. So I don't know what the connection is, but I think that's definitely something that is a connection there, And I know other researchers, James Keenan, Trey Hudson. Oh, that's the other, Trey Hudson in the Souths. I've been down there a couple of times researching with that wonderful team. And I think it's time that all these high strangeness locations really start looking at the commonalities and like, what the heck is all this about? And what does the Air Force know? That's my other question. Navy's come out, Air Force is remaining quiet, and why?
Well,
so
the question that I have is, you brought up the rather unsatisfying conclusion that it's 50-50 military and them, whoever. And I tend to agree. That seems like a really reasonable thing to conclude, even if it is not a comfortable conclusion, and it doesn't really feel like it resolves anything. But there are, of course, within the ufology community varying opinions on that. And you mentioned Linda Moulton Howe. she tends, I spoke with her at length, a couple times. It's been a year or something like that, but I kept asking her things like, so cattle mutilations, they leave, whoever they is, they leave this poor animal just on the ground there in plain sight. I mean, why don't they just have their own stable somewhere in some remote area in the mountains where no one ever runs across them, no one ever sees what they're doing, doing these experiments or whatever. So they unceremoniously drop a giant bull or a calf or something through a tree, and it breaks the branches and it makes a big impact on the ground and makes a hole. It's like, why do they do that?
Right.
And she said,
right.
And this still gives me chills to remember what she said at this point. She said they do it because they can, and because they want us to see the result of their activities. So it's not covert, it's not hidden. I mean, obviously they are hidden, maybe in plain sight. We just can't see them, and we don't know where to look or whatever. But she said the people that she had talked to was a military insider. Of course, she has all sorts of connections with people who know pieces of this puzzle.
Right.
And they say they do it because they can do it. And it's an intimidation thing.
You mean that
was the implication.
the military or the ETs?
See, that was kind of my point, is I think Linda believes it's mostly ET. And then you look on the other end of the spectrum,
Okay.
Stephen Greer, for example, he is of the opinion that it's all military. It's all the MyLab stuff, right, Dan? We were talking about that a little while ago. And so you got people on different ends of that spectrum insisting it's this way or this way.
Right.
I tend to, kind of look in the middle, because the military goes where these
I do too.
UFOs are. The UFOs they keep in close tabs on each other, and it makes sense they'd be in the same places playing this cat and mouse game. So I think you're probably closer, but everyone makes a good argument, and I don't know who to believe at this point, still after so many decades of this stuff.
I know, isn't that the truth? And I think as humans, we want Occam's razor, right? We want a simple explanation for everything. I think is complex. I think could be inner multiple dimensional or portal kind of thing going on. I think military's trying to figure out. I don't think they necessarily have a handle on it. I'm not the cattle mutilation expert. I know, like, Chuck Zukowski, Debbie Zickelmeyer's brother, has done a lot of work in mutilations for, out here in Colorado, and Christopher O'Brien, so that was one of the first guys I called because I read his books, and I'm like, Christopher, what's going on with these cattle mutilations? Because I don't know, is it the military? Is it cult? I mean, I think we can rule out cults. I think we can check that box off. It's not religious cults. Let's take that one off the equation. I think we're left with ET or military. Honestly, that's kind of where I am. And I think is a combination of both. That's what all my research points to combinations of both. Some of the coolest things I found in my research for Elbert County actually was in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's handwritten notes. And I share this also in my presentation because it's so fascinating to me. He claims that his name was Warren, and then it's redacted. So Warren Blank from Camp Carson was at the ranch, which first of all kind of blows me away that we have somebody from Camp Carson at the ranch to begin with, was at the ranch. So where the ranch house is, I mean, this is an area, we have rolling hills, we have a lot of like flat land, but we have groups of ponderosa pines, okay? Like little foresty areas, but it's not all forested. So behind the ranch house was this forested area. And it said, Warren Blank from Camp Carson was at the ranch property. Something took over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, released him, and he would run back. And this did this to him 5 times. That speaks to me as MK Ultra mind control stuff. So that freaks me out. And the other thing that freaks me out are these weird, mysterious disappearing boxes that were reported out there. That's another thing I witnessed. I was with the youngest son. I was with the youngest son and the dad.
Yeah, talk about the black
and it's
that you found.
on these black boxes out there in Kiowa were seen by numerous people. And that's what freaks me out, because for a long time I didn't like talking about it because it sounded strange. But when I read the report and we have Bill Wall, the sheriff, and the undersheriff witnessing this same box. And they said, so Bill Wall's in his patrol car, sees this box that has been seen before. It has lights on it. It makes this B sound. And then if you approach the box, the sound or the tone would shift to this angry B sound, and then the box would disappear. And the sheriff saw this, and he said it was like the box and the tree disappeared into the ground. That's what the sheriff reported. Now, when we went in the pickup truck, I was with the younger son, and this was in the daytime. This was not at night. We had their dogs, the pickup truck, the father and the young son and I were driving around the wooded area behind the ranch house. We get out. I don't know why we got out of the truck, but the dog starts going crazy, that B sound. And I hear the father going, it's the box, get in the truck, get in the truck, get in the truck. We look over and the box is gone. So I witnessed that. But the mother, there were several people that witnessed this box. And it was interesting at a conference, I think it was in Laughlin, I had a woman come up to me and she said, have you ever thought that two things, the box could be a communication device, but you know what I think? I think it's what she said her second idea was, because when I talk to some of these ranchers, one thing they report, and I don't know if Christopher O'Brien and Chuck Zukowski would back me up on this if they hear the same thing, or Linda Moulton Howe, but what my witness has been telling me that the cattle where the mutilations are happening seem to huddle together and they're calm and they herd all together. And the adjoining pastures, they're like freaked out and like, spread out. So a woman came up to me and she goes, do you think that box with that tone is like almost like a mind controller herding the cattle or calming the cattle to do the mutilations? I'm like, wow, I've never heard that before, but that would tend to make sense to me, that it was used for that kind of maybe a controlling or herding or something. I'm like, that's a cool theory. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but that's why I think talking to people and witnesses and other is so important, because, people have ideas that I would never think of myself. So, it's really
so
fascinating.
bizarre.
I don't know.
All these things, I mean, it smacks of 2001, A Space Odyssey, with the monolith and these communication devices. And so is Skinwalker the one where the report of the pole, what was that, a pole digger ended up in the tree or something? Is that am I getting that correct? I sometimes
Yeah.
Post digger.
And I'll tell you,
was it a lawnmower or something?
It was something like that.
Heavy equipment.
It was something like that. And
yeah,
and I know there's paranormal stuff that goes on too. Witness, the sheriff's family. Oh yeah, cabinet doors would open and close, things would go missing. A lot of paranormal stuff. But something that freaked me out watching the Skinwalker Ranch show. Was that they had an experience with that disappearing box. And I'm like, what? And then Trey Hudson at the South's ranch, also on their flare, although it was a big like portal looking box that showed up that they're still trying to investigate and figure out what the heck that was. They had an experience with that too. So I'm like, okay, this is still going on. And so that kind of freaked me out, because I thought, well, that's over with. There's no more of these boxes being reported, but that's not true. These things are still being reported. And what the heck is that? I have no idea. It's really, really bizarre.
So you're obviously in a hot spot. I mean, NORAD, Colorado, I think of NORAD, it's who knows what goes on, who knows how many levels are there, who knows what kind of information and libraries and computer systems. I mean, it's just obviously if ETs were here doing some sort of observation, of course they would have to have a major, congregation in that region. So you've got NORAD, but you've also got, you mentioned several Air Force bases. I don't know, do we have nuclear weapons there at all known? I mean, underground base.
Yeah.
It's a real hot spot. I just wonder if you think that just the mere presence of these others, if that's what leads to some of the paranormal weird stuff. Just you're messing with magnetic field vibrations and everything. Does that open portals for these other weird things, or is that an intentional production by these entities to distract us or manipulate? I mean, what's your theory on that? And then I'll let Dan ask some questions because I'm jumping in here. What do you think about that theory that
Well,
it's
of course, I mean, look at New Mexico, 1947, and not just Roswell, but
Aztec.
all sorts of things going on there because of our, right, Aztec and all that. So Socorro, all that stuff. In Colorado, and here's another interesting spot that not a lot of people research: Francis Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which just recently I'm getting information that, they have nuclear weapons stored at Francis Warren. And there was really multi-witness accounts of really close encounter UFOs around Francis Warren that was reported. And just recently in Colorado, out kind of northeast out there, we had all those, remember the reports of these drone sightings that were just crazy, and everybody was investigating these. They couldn't figure out these drone swarms and all that. I think it's connected also to military nuclear weapons testing, and I can't help but connect that back even to the Elbert County activity. So I do think plays a big role in all of this. I really do. And I don't know, maybe the ETs are out there and they're curious, and the military's out there trying to figure out what the heck's going on with them. I don't know.
You throw in Dan's favorite topic, Sasquatch. What in God's name would a giant hairy hominid have to do with any of this stuff? And the only thing I come up with is that it opens some sort of portal, the activity, the energy for these things to manifest in some way. I don't know. Why don't you talk about Bigfoot, Dan? Because I could go off on a big tangent. I want you to, ask some of your questions.
I know what the hell Bigfoot is all about, and I don't. Just as an aside, I'm talking to a guy in Scotland today who we're going to do a show on. I thought, well, we'll just probably talk about Loch Ness Monster and some cryptids like that. He says, no, they're seeing Bigfoot. They're having Bigfoot sightings in the Scottish Highlands, and I'm wondering what the hell is that all about. So I'm going to have, because of having Katie on tonight, I'm going to have to sleep with the lights on because I'll be too freaked out to be able to go to sleep listening to this. So a couple things come to mind. You said the geology of the area around the ranch that you grew up on was highly magnetic. So what are we talking about as far as the actual geology? What kind of stones are we talking about that could create magnetic fields? Do you know anything about that?
That's a good question. I do know there's quartz, limestone. We do have canyons out there, petroglyphs. Another connection we haven't even touched on yet, which I just recently, because I'm kind of writing my second book now, High Strangeness on a Colorado Ranch. So I wanted to do a dig on the history of the area. And actually, the chapter is called The Macabre History, because this area has a strong, just like Skinwalker Ranch, this strong, a lot of battles that went down between warring tribes, territorial disputes, the white man, the Smoky Hill Trail coming through. We had the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, and they were battling the Ute tribe. So, just like Skinwalker, the Ute and the Cheyenne and all these things, and so many violent things on all sides. I mean, we all, it's just, it was just brutal. So many brutal things happened on this land. Not just between, we had the Sand Creek Massacre, one of our country's worst massacres, right close to there, very close to there. We had hangings of horse thieves and just just horrible things. And to me, that energy is retained in the ground and the water and the land itself. Kind of like people who say, oh, old ancient burial grounds are haunted. I think there could be some truth to that. I think that energy, it doesn't go away. And it is, I don't know about curses or anything like that, but there's definitely got to be some negative energy there. I don't know.
Yes.
So I find that kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, someone who's conducted paranormal ghost investigations and hauntings, that's a very widely accepted theory within that group, that's what a haunting is. It's a residual energy that somehow gets imprinted on the thing that you're experiencing. So that's a very common idea. The other question I was going to
right, and then
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, so what do you know about John Keel, if anything?
I don't, nothing. I don't know anything about John Keel.
So John Keel wrote about a topic that's a favorite of mine that we did the show with the Grabowski person, Bill Grabowski. He wrote a book on the Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And the connection here is Keel talked about window areas. And I think window areas is just another euphemism for portals to other dimensions.
Yeah.
And he's talking about areas, and this happened in Point Pleasant, where you saw poltergeist activities, you saw UFOs, you saw men in black, you saw cryptids, you saw all kinds of weird things. And it seems like there are places around the world that are just window areas. And we've got one. You were listing off the list of the weird spots out there. We've got one here in Washington that actually we've looked into and had a show about. Next to Trout Lake in southern Washington, there's a property that's very much like this. So we start wondering, what the hell is the connection? And John Keel, I
Right.
don't know if he had the answer, but his answer was pretty intriguing. Anyway, I just see a connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Washington, you guys have a lot of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, right? I
You
don't
bet.
never know which one to call, Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I don't know. But you asked me what I think the connection is between the UFOs, the ranch, and Bigfoot. Because this is, I hate to use the term, but I watched Finding Bigfoot. It's not like a very squatchy area. Like I said, we have a lot of open areas. There's only these like small, ponderosa pines out there, little forested area. So I'm not thinking it's a great place for them to hide and be permanently. So the Bigfoot that were at the property back then, I think were directly connected to the craft. Now, Stan Gordon, I think that's his name. Stan Gordon wrote a good book on that phenomenon. And I think there's several accounts of Pennsylvania, same with the Ohio Pile, the Ohio Pile, Pennsylvania creature case has a Bigfoot with craft. I think, are they workers? Are they are they like bodyguards? Are they, I don't know. I don't know what their connection is to the craft. But what I can tell you, the two ETs that were reported to be out in Kiowa on the ranch property, there were two types spotted there. And they said that they were in conflict with one another. They were the Nordic type of ET, and they were those ones I described earlier. And what's crazy about these tubed guys that I described earlier, to me, I was standing in line at a grocery store waiting to check out my groceries, and there was a issue of Popular Mechanics, and it was all about AI. And they had pictures of what AI would look like, and I was like, oh, it's the alien guy. I think those mechanical tube guys are AI. I think they were AI, and I think there's some sort of battle or something going on between those AI creatures. And I think as humanity moves towards artificial intelligence and the merging and Neuralink and all that stuff, I think that we're kind of in a battle of what's going to happen here. Who's going to merge with AI? Who's not? And I think that's going on. That's another theory I have,
Well, there are plenty of theories, and I don't know, maybe that just makes it more difficult to choose among any of those. So we've been on here with Katie for about an hour, so I want to be conscientious about time here. So Dave, is there any other area you want to take this conversation before we let Katie enjoy the rest of her vacation?
So much stuff. I too am interested in the idea of magnetic anomalies, whether that's like you said, limestone quartz, which is known if it's compressed, it can have certain electromagnetic properties. I don't know why that would specifically attract entities or even the military. So I'm curious, what map were you referring to that you looked? Was it magnetic anomalies, magnetic field anomalies, or was it composition?
Yeah, if you just look up
ground?
If you just
complicated.
look up like a map of magnetic anomalies of the US, it'll bring up the geological map. It's pretty easy to search. It's really interesting to really zero in on some of these high strangeness locations and just seeing if they're highly magnetic. I mean, too, at Skinwalker Ranch, they had, I don't know if they were soldiers or who were out there, but some had night vision goggles on and others didn't. And they saw something open up and a creature crawl out. And I was like, oh, maybe that's where things are coming in and out of, and maybe it needs to be highly magnetic for that to happen. Maybe there needs to be a certain perfect formula for these things to occur. And the thing I was going to say earlier that I've also been really interested in, just as contactees, but it's also the power that we have to interact with the phenomenon, the power of consciousness. And a lot of contactees and abductees that I talk to having these traumatic kind of backgrounds, or being highly, it doesn't even have to be traumatic per se. It could be near-death experiences. It could be just as high energy. And that you think about Elbert County and all the stuff that's going on, everybody that I've talked to said everybody was on high alert. Everybody was like high mutilation time. It was an eerie time. So emotions are running high. And I think that can increase activity in itself. Also, through traumas and things, people disassociate. And I think when people disassociate, they can tap into something else out there. So I think consciousness also plays a role, and you have like mass hysteria, mass group getting charged. And maybe that's why the activity was so high, because the whole town was charged up and it was feeding something. That's something I'm researching and really learning about right now. And there's a lot of PhDs that are actually looking into that disassociation consciousness piece of it. And I find that really fascinating. So it's just a whole melting pot of things. And I think someday we'll find some answers. I do think we will.
I think the trend is definitely towards that. You go back half a century ago, and maybe Jacques Vallée was talking about some of this stuff. You have to add consciousness into the equation to understand the omniverse, or whatever phrase he coined that was between subjective and objective. He was saying it was a mixture of that, and obviously that includes human consciousness at some level. So there were a few people talking about that many years ago, but it hasn't really been until very recently, I think, that it's become the accepted theory. Like what you're saying is the intensity of emotion can feed into it, magnetic,
we can manifest
geological anomaly. But see, what I'm thinking is it's people like you who lead the way, because you were an experiencer at a young age, and that tends to go in families also. Dan and I are like concrete blocks or something of humans, because we don't have experiences. Well, I'm sorry. Maybe it's a little harsh on me. I feel like sometimes, though, that I'm not in tune. I feel like I'm not in tune with any of this paranormal stuff. And I don't know why.
Maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe it is. But the question I have for you is this something that has run in your family at all? I mean, do your parents have any of these experiences too? I mean, you don't have to.
My grandfather, like I mentioned, had my grandfather had a sighting. He's a Navy man, Lake Como, that was investigated by J. Allen Hynek in the early 60s. My mom would speak about, seeing grandma's apparition at the foot of the bed. And there was always like paranormal stuff going on all the time. Both my mom, my dad, my grandfather. So, there has been. And I hear that all the time with people. So I don't know if that's just if you believe it and accept it, that it happens more easily, or we manifest it, or we can interact with it, or is there the trauma piece? I don't know what that is. But at the same time, I will say sometimes my sister gets a little mad because she's like, her and I both experiences some of the same traumas growing up and stuff. She was like, well, but it doesn't happen to her nearly as much as me. So what's that about? Because that's kind of a controlled thing. However, here's an interesting piece. Recently, thanks to Ancestry, I just discovered a half brother that lives in Chicago. We just met just a couple of years ago. And what was funny about that is here's a gentleman that we knew nothing about. And for 10, 15 years, he is so into UFOs and the
Wow.
paranormal and Egypt and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, okay, that's DNA or something going on there. So that was wild. But yeah. I don't know what that is. I don't know that, but I think that also plays a role in this.
It's hard to
So,
find
it's
patterns.
complex. I think we want simple and it's complex. Yeah. Yeah.
And with such a complex subject, we want to find anything that's a pattern that's consistent. And it's so hard to find that. That's one of them, though, is these things tend to be, sensitives tend to run in families, almost always. Everyone we interview, were your parents like this, were your siblings, your grandparents? Most of the time, wouldn't you say, Dan, they say, yeah. They don't say, oh no, it's just me. I mean, occasionally you get that. So that's something you can kind of hang your hat on a little bit in this whole phenomenon, but there's so little otherwise that really you can say definitively about it, which keeps it interesting, obviously, but it also makes it pretty frustrating when you just give me something, something I can check the box on. And maybe that's just the nature of it all anyway, is to always constantly be moving and avoiding and evolving. It's good. It's fun because it never ends. You can never get bored of it, for sure. And it's a challenge, though, to stay grounded in all of this stuff when it's always kind of swirling around and evolving. It's like I don't know what to make of that now. It's fun, though.
Right. It's so many pieces of the puzzle, and there's people out there doing really good work with that, studying all the commonalities and contact experiences, and Ray Hernandez and their study group that they had and talking with people all around the world. So it's really fascinating. I think we will get closer and closer to answers just because of technology and how we can all communicate, like on Zoom now. I think it's going to make a big difference. And I think disclosure is going to come from the people. And I think that's why, Old Navy and that government's trying to get ahead of this, because it's coming. It's going to come from us, the people, and not the government. And they're going, oh no, what do we do? So yeah, it's an exciting time to be involved in all this, for sure. Yeah,
and Katie has a lot of good stuff on her website. I was looking earlier, so I want to make sure to refer our listeners to her site. Can you give that? I'll put it in the YouTube description. What's the URL for the best one for you?
It's my name.com. So KatieGriboski.com. And I also have my book there. You can get Letters of Love and Light, 4 decades of UFO encounters, experiences, and sightings, shared with R. Leo Sprinkle, PhD. Because when I went up there to selfishly investigate my own experiences, I got lost in 84 boxes of letters people wrote to Dr. Sprinkle from around the world. And I woke up in a lucid dream and I thought, well, if I find these interesting, other people were too. So I spent 3.5 years pulling out the really good, juicy parts of other people's experiences and compiling them into a book, and got to know Dr. Leo Sprinkle very, very well. We became very good friends. And it's just fascinating. There was a really early Snowflake, Arizona, Travis Walton type sighting in the 30s that was written about. And so I found some kind of gems. I found more information on the Francis Warren sightings out there in Wyoming and different little tidbits. So it's a really cool, there's a chapter in there too about like channeling the ETs. And a lot of people wrote about, was this a dream or was this a memory? Because some dreams can seem so real for contactees and abductees. So that was interesting. And yeah, it was a fun thing. And I'll tell you, nothing makes you more humble than looking at pioneers in the field, because man, they've been at this for 40 some years, and we have to reinvent the wheel and read all about 2,000 books just to get caught up to these guys. And then, so it's really cool. But anyway, so yeah, all that's on the website.
Well, at the risk of stealing a phrase from a Nicolas Cage movie, I think Katie's kind of a national treasure, and we're very fortunate to have her on our program talking with us today. And if you can steer us in any direction toward other guests that you think might be receptive to this kind of experience, we always appreciate that. But I want to thank you for taking time out of your vacation to spend an hour or so with us.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm always happy to be here. It's a lot of fun. We're actually leaving Wednesday, my friend and I, out to the Ozarks UFO conference. So a lot of great researchers there. One of my favorite researchers of all time, David Marler, will be speaking. He is a researcher's researcher, and his big archives of information with NICAP and CUFOS and all that. So looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm going to go out to the Roswell Festival. I'll be out in Pine Bush, New York this year. That'll be a fun festival. So I got it busy. I'll be speaking in Phoenix with Phoenix MUFON and Stacy Wright and all those great people out there. So just trying to get out there and getting more involved, because the more people you talk to, the more information we get. So it's going to be a fun summer.
I went to
So
Roswell
maybe I'll see
in
some of you out there.
1997, and that was an experience in and of itself. That was just a real great celebration and just a great experience. So anyway, thanks again, Katie, for being on with us. Stay in touch, okay?
I will. Thank you guys both so much.
Thanks, Katie.
Have a great week.
It was great. You too.
All right.
All right. Bye.
All right. And bye-bye.